Let me read Fred's bio real quick, and then we'll get started. Fred brings over 40 years of experience in construction, telecom hardware, and software development. In 1999, he founded BizBot 1.0, a pioneering cloud company. 9 years ago, while working on a fiber optic and commercial solar construction, he identified the needs for specialized software in the construction industry, particularly for land surveyors. This led to the development of QFactor for surveyors, released 8 years ago, which has gained a loyal base of surveying companies. Fred has engaged with over 100 surveyors, ranging from sole proprietors to CEOs, through demonstrations, discussions, and participation in regional survey conferences. This has given him a comprehensive understanding of surveyors' pain points in managing and determining project profitability. The prevalent inefficiencies in the surveyor's workflow process stems from using project management applications that do not align with their industry requirements, despite having cutting-edge technology in the field. This misalignment causes waste of time, excess work in progress, and team confusion, creating bottlenecks in the industry where there's more work than there are people that do it. So it's a great bio. And Fred's been on with us a couple times, and tonight Fred will be doing QuickBooks accounting for survey companies. And that'll kind of lead into the discussion about QFactor and a few other things. But as always, Fred, we love your time and love helping the business side of the surveyors industry. So,
all right. Well, thank you, Trent, for the introduction. Still accurate, but now it's probably over 200 surveyors that I've spoken.
go.
And our customer base is growing, and getting project profitability requires having the right numbers in a place that allows you to compare what your estimates were to what your actual numbers are. And when our application talks to QuickBooks Online, QuickBooks Desktop, and then T-Sheets or QuickBooks Time for time entry. And bringing the three applications together, as Trent mentioned, I was working for a fiber optic construction company and a commercial solar company, and I would have to extract information from QuickBooks. I would have to extract it from spreadsheets, other applications, in order to create a project profitability report. And many times pulling that information together, going through it, by the time I had the profitability report, it was 2 weeks after the data was still good. And that doesn't tell you what happened in the interim 2 weeks. The project could have really gone south in that time, and you're looking at the report and it looks profitable. So having built software in the past, mainly in the health and wellness industry, doing a similar type of application, I knew that I could take what I was doing for these construction companies and create an application out of it. And so thus QFactor for surveyors was born. It originally started out as a general construction project management application, but a good friend of mine was the CFO for a 25-person, 35-year-old survey company, still owned by the guy who started it out of college. And his first complaint was, my accountant's out, or it only comes in 2 days a week. When a client calls and wants their drawings, we don't know if they paid their invoice, and we're not giving them up until we know. And that was a recurring theme with a lot of other surveyors. And after meeting with Mike of MBS Land Survey in San Luis Obispo, he hired me to do soup to nuts analysis of his business, from first phone call in requesting service, all the way through field work, CAD work, submission of drawings, to invoice paid and complete. And so we've focused on the survey industry because it's underserved in this regard. So touching on QuickBooks, I've got over 30 years experience with QuickBooks. My father taught accounting, so I grew up with it. It was beat into my head. And it's a very important thing to understand for managing any business. And what we find a lot of times is survey companies start as a surveyor, then his wife jumps in and helps with bookkeeping, and the company grows, and suddenly it's got 10 employees, 15 employees, and they need help with tracking projects. With excuse me, with most of our clients, we end up spending quite a bit of time focused on QuickBooks, because without the QuickBooks data being dialed in properly, the project profitability and the project tracking information doesn't align with what they really need it to align with. So being that we always touch on accounting, I thought it would be a good opportunity to explain what we've learned over time and some of the best practices that we've learned for setting up QuickBooks, whether it's desktop or online, it applies to both. What we've learned that really, a lot of it is just setting it up properly at the very beginning. And once you do that, the information flows properly throughout the system. We also have a lot of clients that have come on board and they were using Excel spreadsheets or even paper for time tracking. And we can help save a lot of time just by getting onto T-Sheets or QuickBooks Time for doing that. And everything then becomes integrated, so you enter data once and it shows up where needed. So with that, I'll just go ahead and jump into the first thing, which is the very important part of QuickBooks, is your customer setup. A lot of you have residential type of clients where it's a one-off project and you may never hear from them again, or they may call in 10 years, or the new owner of that property may call in 10 years. But you also have civil engineering companies, title companies, mortgage companies that are repeat customers. And so we recommend certain ways of setting those customers up so you can track them very well within QuickBooks and understand what your accounts receivable are for those folks. So first off here, I'll just jump into, here's Aaron Hernandez Civil Engineering, which is a recurring client for our demo. And you'll see underneath here, we highly recommend the use of project codes, which most survey companies seem to use in some variation of year, maybe month, and then 3 or 4 or 5 digits for the project code to distinguish it. One thing that QuickBooks doesn't explain very well, and a lot of people don't understand, is how to set up a sub project or a sub job for a customer. And this is one of the things that we coach our clients on to do and that I want to convey to you today. So you'll see here we have Aaron Hernandez Civil Engineering, and then you see these distinct project codes underneath. Those are individual projects that we can now track by the code. Nobody needs to know any other information about the project other than code to do their time entry, to track paperwork, to track process flow, and then also to track invoicing. By setting it up this way, we can see that overall Hernandez owes us $8,000, but that doesn't tell us what it breaks down to in each project. In the case of this project, it's a construction engineering or construction staking project, which is then broken down into other sub jobs to represent the different phases of construction surveying. And many times those can take 6 months, 2 years, or even 5 years to complete that overall project. But you want to track each individual phase so that you can see here we're owed $2,000 on the demolition portion. And then we're still owed $435 on the building layout portion. That then rolls up and summarizes what's owed on this project overall, which then rolls up and shows all monies that Hernandez Civil Engineering owns us. And so down here we have this project 23103 that owes $2,900 and then 19007 that owes more. This really helps out when it comes to AR collections and understanding where the money goes within your customer base. So that's on the customer side of things. And we do recommend, even for one-off clients, that you create a sub job, give it a project code, because now if you're going to use something like T-Sheets or QuickBooks Time, those project codes and customer information are automatically updated to T-Sheets. So when your employees are entering time, they're not looking for a customer name or an address. They're looking for a project code, and everybody understands it clear across the company. So the other area that we hit upon, and this is the one that affects people the most, is what are called service items within QuickBooks. And these are what people in your company would put their time against. So, most survey companies live and die by the hour. Your employees are tracking their time by the hour, and you're paying them by the hour. And that's where we really get into the profitability report, is understanding the work breakdown structure of what they're doing, but we want it to originate in our accounting application, because that pays benefits on the time entry side, but it also pays benefits on reporting for your P&L. And when you bring in time against a project, even if it's a fixed fee, I mean, most of you do fixed fees, or a lot of you do fixed fee, we still want to track the underlying hours that went into that fixed fee project to, again, understand profitability. If everybody's just putting time against boundary survey and you don't know exactly what they did on that, that doesn't give you the detail you need to understand where you could improve, or where you are profitable, where you're meeting your estimates and where you aren't. So here you can see that we have a service item for a 1-person field survey crew, a 2-person field survey crew, and over here we have our billing rate. And so that's an important number to track for what you're doing on these hours. And so this is where a lot of times what we'll see is just a standard boundary survey as a service item. And so this is where we're recommending breaking it out into what people are actually doing on a boundary survey. Any questions so far? All right. So this again is just a setting feature. This doesn't require a lot of overhead on your time, but it just takes sitting down and deciding what it is that you want to track within your company on the billing side, on the pay side, and on the profitability side. So the next thing that we do is we change your chart of accounts a little. Many of our clients come in and they just have one income account, and when they look at their P&L, all they see is, sales or sales on services or something like that. And it's a block number that doesn't break down where the revenue is really coming from within the company. Excuse me. So here is an example of each one of those service items feeding into a chart of accounts account. If I come back here, you'll see that these fieldwork ones are going into an income account called fieldwork. And then when I come over here, I see that we've made $28,000 in fieldwork so far. And that is just a simple setting that then produces a much more detailed P&L for you to look at. And then when we get into expenses, since this is a demo account, we don't go into expenses too much, but you can also do a similar thing for tracking your expenses. So you can see what your fieldwork income is, what your fieldwork expenses are, and get a general monthly idea of how you're doing on profitability. It doesn't go into the details of each project here, though. That's where in Q Factor, I'll show you how we break that out for you. So in this way, you can actually see where you're making your money and decide that maybe administrative services isn't bringing that much revenue, so we can avoid that or not go into that area, or maybe we need to do more. But at least you have the numbers to look at to make that decision. So that covers the main things that we work with our clients on and can help them get it set up and so that it looks more like this. And then where this comes into play, well, let me go into QuickBooks Time. As I mentioned, a lot of people are doing this with paper or Excel spreadsheet. We highly recommend this application. QuickBooks also calls it Workspaces, QuickBooks Time, but it's commonly known as T-Sheets. That's what it started as. And so this is, excuse me, a typical time entry that your employees can work with. The phone application is much nicer looking. This is the web application. And what I can do is I come in here and I'm going to look for the project that I want to put my time against. And again, back to where project codes come in handy, I type in 3560 and it auto senses and takes me directly to the right project. Now I can come in here and enter my time. I did 3 hours, and now this is where your service item comes in very important. So we can see here that I have a choice of which type of service item in the field to put my time against. So if I go ahead and click one person field survey, and is it billable or not? And I'll talk more about the non-billable time in a moment, but for right now, we'll do this as billable. And you can see how quickly I did this. I mean, it didn't take a lot of time on my part. And what we recommend to our clients is get your employees to use the note fields to say exactly what they did for those 3 hours of one person field survey work. Because this field is now trackable within our application to where you can filter information and look and see how much staking was done. And I mentioned the first client that we had who's still with us after 7 years. They actually had a page of 15 different acronyms that people had to use on their time entry to standardize it. You know, because staking can get spelled a couple different ways. And so STK is what their acronym is for staking. And then I can come in here and do another 3 hours, same thing. Maybe it was layout and planning. Then I can come in and pick another customer. So we'll go to our Hernandez one. So we'll put time against 1904 and we'll do it for rough grade. And I can come over here, put 5 hours, and let's say it was CAD. I'm a very flexible employee. So I downloaded some data because then I need to get it into my app to start working with it. So very quickly and without a lot of effort, I've just now entered time for 2 different projects on 3 different days and provided enough notes to say exactly what I did. Now this information, because with Q Factor, we tie into your QuickBooks data and we tie into your T-sheet data. With QuickBooks Online and QuickBooks Desktop, we're automatically pulling this data into a project report for you. So I'll go ahead and show project profitability here. So this is the project 19356. So this is where the number that we're keying off here. I can come in here and see all the time entries against this project, which can come in very handy if a client calls in and says, hey, nobody was out there last week. Well, anybody in the company can come in and bring up the project and take a look and say, you know, well, in this case, we weren't there last week, we were there today. But at least now you're answering that customer's question about was anybody out there, when were they out there, what were they doing, without a lot of effort, without, you know, spending 3 hours trying to figure out how to answer that question. So before I go to the profitability, I'll show you where we use those service items to track your estimates. So having that estimate in place with the service items in place now allows us to track it against the actual time that goes into the job. So in this case, we've got a pretty sizable project. Right here, we're bringing in our one person field survey. We can give it some kind of name description, how many hours we estimate, and what we're charging our clients for that time. Now, back to earlier, I said that you may do a fixed fee. So this is actually a boundary survey. But these are all the things that are going to go into doing this boundary survey. And in our application, we can just show it as a fixed fee, but now we have the underlying work breakdown to show how we arrived at that fixed fee. And that's where I feel like there's a big gap between folks who just track their, you know, fixed fee service item for a boundary survey and don't understand everything that's going into it. I mean, you do understand it because that's your job, but understanding it from a project management and an accounting standpoint, this allows you to really get that granular detail. So I'll just leave this as is. And then again, these are the time entries against it. Everything in here should match something on our estimate. This drives to the profitability report. And this is what I was really building the application for, because you don't want to take a look at your hours 3 weeks later and try to figure out, did everybody put their time in right? Did it go against the right thing? Now it's sitting in accounting waiting to be invoiced. And you can spend 3 or 4 hours on one of these projects just figuring out, is the invoice right? And that's a lot of overhead time that we're eliminating by bringing this information together in one place. And again, this is real-time information. As soon as that time gets entered, it's going to show up in here. So we're now taking and comparing your estimated hours right here to the actual hours that were put against the project. And as you can imagine, red is this needs your attention. Green is we're under budget, so we're good. But you can come in here as the project manager and just say, oh, we overestimated this because we're done with the drone. So, okay, that's, that adds to your profit margin if you overestimate it, but it takes away from it if you underestimate it. And so here's a case where we see we're 3 hours over our estimate. Now that would lead to the question of, are we actually 3 hours over? Did somebody put their time against the wrong project? And so to make tracking that easier, you click on this and it's going to show you everybody who put time against the project. And I could come in here and look at this and say, well, Bo put it against the wrong project. We take corrective action in T-sheets and assign it to the right project. And then our project comes back into budget and the other project comes back into budget. Some of our clients that we worked with, we found out that they had actually two projects, same projects in their accounting system. And people were billing time against the second project, but nobody was invoicing time against that second project. We found $6,000 in uninvoiced time that was not picked up until it got into Q Factor. So there's great value in being able to quickly manage by exception. And that's where this report gets you to. And then it also gets to where, tracking this in real time, if you see that time is going over, there may be an opportunity to say, hey, we need to bill for extra services. And you want to do this before you get to the final invoice, because that's a hard time to go back and say, hey, we went over, we added it to the invoice, will you please pay it? Well, it's not in my contract. So being able to catch these early on while they're still in process gives you that opportunity to get a hold of the client and say, hey, we ran into these issues. It's going to take another 5 hours. Here's an invoice, or here's a contract stipulating a change order, actually stipulating that. You get it signed off, and now you bring your project back into equilibrium and salvage your profitability. There's nothing worse than getting at the end of it and having to eat a couple hundred or a couple $1,000s on a project because nobody knew until invoicing. So the best time to catch it is while it's happening. And then we show you what your estimated fees are, what your actual fees are. So since we know what you're billing in QuickBooks, then we can show the estimate versus the actual, show you the differences, where we're at percentage-wise. And then by connecting to QuickBooks also, we can see what your employee pay rates are. So as each employee starts entering time against the project for what they did, we can see what the labor costs were and give you a general profitability report. This doesn't include your overhead. This doesn't include, well, some of this includes your non-billable time against the project, as long as somebody tracked it. So we've seen where, you may have a project that's going on all day and somebody put in an hour of time to get the truck set up. Well, that's not necessarily billable to your client, but it does impact the profitability of the project. So this is where maybe a good time to jump into tracking non-billable time. And then here we can see, totals for the whole project. But one of the things that we learned on the non-billable time is one of our early clients, we got them set up on QuickBooks properly, set up on Q Factor, T-sheets. That was a big time saver for them. And as a result of all this, the owner's wife no longer had to come in every day to do accounting stuff because it was very streamlined and very simple to do. Well, since she wasn't coming in, she also wasn't answering the phones. And when everybody's out in the field, the CAD person's the only one left in the office. And when the phone's ringing off the hook, It just so happened in this case, the CAD technician was very conscientious about their time. And every time he had to pick up the phone, he would enter 15 minutes non-billable phone. And over the course of 3 months, we were able to do analysis on this and see that when he picked up the phone, that was non-billable time, which was costing them revenue. And it was also costing them labor because now they're paying this person to answer the phone. And by tracking that non-billable overhead, what we figured out was they were losing about $6,000 a month in billable time because that CAD operator ended up being the phone person. And by being able to see that number, it was very easy to convince the owner to hire not a $3,000 a month general manager, but a $4,000 a month general manager, so that CAD person could get back to work. And by doing that, I mean, he felt good about doing that now, instead of just hitting him with, hey, you need to spend another 3,000. Well, why would I do that? Well, because you're losing money. Well, okay, that makes sense. And as a result of that, they increased their business and their profitability because now they had a solid person working the phones, working the proposals, and managing the projects while everybody else could go and do what they're getting paid for. So that was a great example of tracking non-billable time. We also found through another client that they had a guy padding his payroll. He was saying it was taking an hour and a half to load the truck every day when it really took him 30 minutes. And they had some corrective action to do there, but we caught it because it was costing the company time and money. We were able to catch it because we were tracking non-billable time. So kind of within our application, then one of the other things that we do, what my observation was at the fiber optic company and the solar company was there was a lot of interaction between project managers and accounting. And accounting really doesn't want to be bothered by things. They want to bother other people, but they don't want to be bothered, especially when it's payroll or it's invoicing time. You know, these folks are working really hard to get all that done. And all of a sudden, a project manager comes in and says, I need an update on these 5 projects. Where are we at on invoicing? Where are we at on hours and time? So what I did was I took the different touch points that were pretty frequent between project management and accounting. And because we're seeing the QuickBooks data, we're able to push that information over to the project manager so they don't have to call. And so the one here is the time entries page where I can see all time entries. Now I don't have to log into T-Sheets and figure out how to run a report there. So we're saving you time and effort there. And then as a project manager, I want to know where we're at on invoicing with this. And so we can pull in the invoicing information so they can come in and take a look and say, okay, I've got 3 outstanding invoices out of 5. I can see what's paid and unpaid. I can see what the amounts are. And now this gives you the benefit of when that project manager tends to be the best person to deal with the client. They're the ones that may have brought in the project. They're the ones managing the project. So now they know when this client calls in or they call the client, they can gently remind them that, hey, you've got a couple outstanding invoices. It'd be great if you get them paid, especially if the client calls in to ask for something. I mean, you got to get paid. So this gives your team the power to understand where you're at with that. We also show that information on the project details page. So here is where we pull in the QuickBooks information. We can show what the balance due is, who the billing company is, and who the contact is for billing. So you may have somebody at the front desk who Friday morning is going through and calling the people that owe you money. Or maybe it goes to the boss level. You know, maybe that's a more delicate situation. You want the boss to do it. But the information's now in here without having to go into QuickBooks to figure it out. And then we have the contact information in here. So there's a contacts page where we bring in all stakeholders for the project, internal and external. And now I don't have to look for Jenny Tan's information to get a hold of her. It's right here, easy to access. And as long as it's updated properly, then there was no asking somebody, hey, how do I get a hold of this person? Or if they call in, who is this person? I can come in and figure out Jenny Tan is the client or the primary contact. And we also have some reporting where we can come in and look at overall project billing. And so again, this is where you don't have to go into QuickBooks to do this. We bring in the information for you. So I can see that on this project that we've had 5 invoices, the balance due is 21,000, the invoice total is 24,000, and our estimate is 37,000. So this gives me a good idea of where I'm at on receivables, what's been paid, what we estimated, and where the project is on percentage of dollar volume. And this makes it very easy to then come in here and go right to the project and take a look at the details. Then we have the unbilled time report. So when we're looking at projects, once you build invoiced, you've now got a receivable. But there's that gap between the time of when your team put time into a project and when it actually gets invoiced. And that's where you've got a great deal of exposure. And understanding where you're at on that uninvoiced time is very critical to your cash flow. So you may see opportunities in here where you say, hey, let's get a milestone payment or a progress payment out of these folks because it's getting to be quite a bit of money. And it's reasonable for us to go in and say, we've got $10,000 of billable time with you. Here's an invoice for it. And then you keep moving along with the project, but now you know when to invoice, how much you should invoice, and make sure that you're keeping your cash flow up to date. And that's typically referred to as the work in process. You've paid your employees to work on it, but your customer's not paid you for their time. And that's where your exposure really comes in. And then on the front end side of things, we start at the proposal level, and that's where the estimator comes in. And so I can come into my project proposals, and if I need to follow up on surveys, what we learned is a lot of times the PDF will go out to the customer and a file gets buried on a desk and nobody knows how many proposals are out there, what their dollar volume is, or even what we committed to. And so through with what we have here, it's very simple to come in and see what our estimated fees are on open proposals. And if I'm in charge of proposals and following up on them, this is my task list right here without assigning a task. I'm going to be all over this one to make sure we get it to close and get it over the line. And so by sorting by dollar volume, I can spend my time most effectively going after the projects that bring in the most revenue for the company and work. And then I work my way down to some of the smaller ones, but at least I have a list. I know who it is, and I can come in here, click on it, and see who the contact is and make my follow-up call. We also recommend that if a proposal doesn't close for whatever reason, pricing, went to a competitor, project was canceled, that you track that information so that over time you understand why your proposals aren't closing and see, try to take remedy for that. So I really covered in pretty short order a very dry subject on accounting, and don't want to go too much into the application here yet because this was, the idea was to touch upon the accounting. So I can open it up to questions.
100%. If anybody's got questions. Anybody there?
I noticed
everybody, Fred.
I noticed we lost some, but
That's right.
those that are hanging in there. And I did take a very dry and somewhat complicated subject and distill it down, and I think to simplicity, and hopefully that's why there aren't too many questions.
There you go. It all depends, yeah. And I guess difference between QuickBooks Online and QuickBooks Desktop, right? That's
Yeah,
pretty close to the same, but yeah.
That's a good thing to bring up because it used to be the majority of our clients and our new clients were all on desktop. now we're seeing that trend changing big time to where almost all the new inbound demos and requests and new clients are on QuickBooks Online. And QuickBooks, I've been involved with QuickBooks for 30 years and I stay up to date with what they're doing. And if you're on desktop, eventually they're going to force you to go over to online. And it can be a painful process. They haven't done it very elegantly, but it can be a painful process depending on which version of desktop you have. And so we have worked with several of our clients to help them with that transfer over from desktop to online. And, you know, since we've done it many, many times, then we can bring in that knowledge and expertise to help do it. There are some differences between them, which kind of surprises me. You'd think the company that built the desktop application would do the online application, you know, apple to apple. They haven't quite, but depending on your skill set or your accountant's or your bookkeeper skill set, the transition can be eased, you know, with some help.
Gotcha. Go for it, Kathy.
Hey, quick question. So we're using QuickBooks Online and we had a couple new hires back in April. And when I set them up, I can pay them and I can do, you know, they're there, they're getting all set up in Workforce, but they cannot enter time. And I've called over to QuickBooks. I've had a trouble ticket started. They couldn't solve it. They were sending it off to their back office engineering. And this was months ago. We've been using this for a couple years and haven't had an issue like this before, but is this common with QuickBooks? And have you heard of anybody else that's dealing with this? Because right now we have two employees that can't track any time. We're putting their time in Excel. It's ridiculous.
I've run into it on desktop and the differentiator was a middle initial. And I haven't run into the same thing on with online, but that could be the case because they handle the middle initial for people in different ways. And it doesn't necessarily translate over to T-Sheets or QuickBooks Workforce very well. So I would take a look and see if there's a middle initial in there, and if there is, get rid of it and see if that resolves it. And then also make sure that when you do the, you know, they've got the ability in here to take a look at what your sync did. So if you're syncing, it will tell you we updated 4 new employees, or it'll say 0. But being that you did it many months ago, you know, I would take a look at the sync and see if it even synced them.
Yeah, we've tried, you know, every couple of weeks I'll get in there and try and re-invite them over and have them try and get into tracking time, and it's still the same thing. And so I've just been every few weeks getting on the phone with QuickBooks, and it's literally sitting with support for an hour, hour and a half, and them coming back saying they have a trouble ticket and they're working on it.
Their service used to be a lot better. And we are QuickBooks resellers and T-Sheet resellers and advisors. And so we get a different tier of support if we call in, and sometimes we get to quicker resolution, or we're able to do it ourselves because we run into the issue before. So a lot of our clients set us up as an accountant in their QuickBooks Online, and then a non-billable seat in their T-Sheets. And then we can go in and take a look and see what's going on. One benefit we have is once we connect those things, we can see the data. And that's where we can pick it apart and see something they may not see.
Great. I'll be in touch with you offline then.
All right.
There you go. Yeah, I wonder, like you said, simple of removing the middle initial and then resyncing it, forcing it to go back in, right? And then I know some of the other issues we've had, but we run desktop, was the location services on their phones had to be on, right? So those are a couple
Oh,
of
the geofencing?
Yeah. So they can't start or stop their time if the time tracking stuff isn't on, location services isn't on, that kind of stuff. So there was a couple of hiccups on those, but
so Kathy, one thought comes to mind is, do they show up under your employees in QuickBooks in Workforce?
Yes, they do. And I'm paying
And
them
as active?
as active. Yeah. And I'm able to, I do the payroll for them. You know, I just have to go in and put their hours in myself. They're not able to do their own login and do their own hours.
Hmm. Okay, yeah, if you want to contact me offline, then we can do a Zoom session and just show me what you've got and I can take a look at it, no problem.
Great.
There you go. That's awesome. I love it. That's the good stuff about this stuff.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and as I said, because we're resellers, a lot of our clients, they gravitate towards what we do because we do touch on the accounting side of things.
Mhm.
And most project management tools are just interested in getting you set up and having you move along and add more users. They don't address some of the underlying issues, which then we had one client who, pretty good sized company, about 30 surveyors and 15-year-old QuickBooks file. And the guy was sold on the profitability report. And after we got him set up, one of the things we do is we take your QuickBooks data and we convert them over to QFactor projects so you don't have to do that manually. So when you start using the application, you see all your projects in there connected to your QuickBooks customers. So I got on the phone with them for training, but their CFO had called me beforehand and said, be aware. This guy's not real happy, but the reason is our data's not very good. And so we got onto the training process and he went right into the profitability report and he said, this is what you sold us on and this looks like crap. And his CFO cut him off and said, QFactor's doing its job. It's showing us what our data looks like and it's crap. And so he backed off and they had us come in and clean up the file and get that data set up and help the CFO walk through the process. Because not everybody knows how to use QuickBooks. That's one of the other challenges is everybody uses it, but not everybody knows how to use it. And so just like some of the simple setting things, I've worked with, high level accountants who didn't know you could do these things in QFactor or in QuickBooks. So yeah, if the data is not good in QuickBooks, it's not going to look good in a project management tool. And that's where we are a differentiator is we touch on that.
Yeah, that's what I like about the T sheets and the Q factor being seamless, because it's just ties everything together, makes that profitability so much easier to see instantaneously, like you said, right? So
Yeah. Well, full disclosure, Trent is a customer.
yeah, I have been. Yep.
Has been a long time, and
Yeah.
he's a friend and a mentor, and I
Good
appreciate
stuff.
the opportunities he gives me here.
That's right. That's good stuff. You have a tab opened up there for chart of accounts. I don't know if that was intention to go over anything there, but I didn't.
I just had it there just in
Okay.
case, but I think that this one shows better.
Okay.
Here we go. So this is your chart of accounts. This is where we set up an income account called Fieldwork.
Right.
And that's where it then shows up over here in our P&L. And then if you do, none of them show up, well, yeah, none of them show up on your balance sheet. So,
Right.
that's a totally separate type of reporting. But it has to be in your chart of accounts in order for us to connect the service item to the right chart of accounts to produce this report. And that again is something that's a simple setting that I've taught people who've been using QuickBooks for years didn't know you could do that.
Very cool.
All right, so it's after the 4th of July weekend. I'm surprised, people did show up.
That's right. Yeah, that's why we don't do too many of these during the summer, because it's pretty
Excuse me.
low, but pretty low attendance. Everybody's busy. Even when I sent the emails out, I still got, it seemed like 100 out of offices replies for the email today. So it's everybody does their summer vacation. So it's good
Yep.
stuff. But I like to at least keep one a month, keep everybody engaged a little bit. But
Yeah.
still good stuff. So well, if
There's no other questions.
yeah, do you want to go put it back on your website and then maybe just throw where's your contact information or something that
Yeah, I think we have a contact form.
contact me somewhere.
So
Schedule a
if
meeting.
you're
Yeah, there you go.
interested in more information, we do have our Let's Talk button.
Yep. Perfect.
In here, it shows the calendar of available times. We do a 30-minute demonstration, and we can just use it to touch on QuickBooks if you like. And so there's my available times, and once you click on it, it will ask for your contact info, and then we'll have a Zoom session scheduled.
Otherwise, it's just Fred your email would be fred@bizwad.com. Yeah,
Correct.
super simple. So
And you're welcome, George.
there you go. That's awesome.
I think you've been to most of my presentations, George.
That's right. George was wondering where this stuff was when he was on the business
Oh,
side.
yes. Oh, yes.
That one.
Okay, well, Trent, thanks again for the opportunity to present.
Always, I appreciate it. George is typing away. Hold on. Wait for him to
Okay.
finish. George has got something to say. He's always hiding. Oh, yeah. He was typing to me, sorry.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, maybe a trip to Death Valley for a half marathon. There was a group of on a side note, that's what he said, stay cool, maybe a trip to half marathon in Death Valley. Probably not so much. But there was a group of motorcycles yesterday riding
Yeah,
through, and one of them died. So crazy,
that's sad.
crazy hot. Well, like they said, the asphalt temps pushing almost 200 degrees through.
Oh my God, I'm surprised the tires lasted.
Yeah. So it was very dangerous for sure. But at least
All
we're
right,
at least we're
folks.
indoors on Zoom, so I appreciate that as always.
Right.
Awesome. So anybody feel free to reach out to Fred. Like I said, fred@bizwat.com, or jump on his website and run through there as well, and continue to make the business side of surveying better. I love it.
All right.
Awesome,
Happy to
Fred.
do it.
Have a good week, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks.